I don't know how many of you believe in time travel. Don't know how many of you actually, know history of certain areas. Don't know how many of you are old farts like me. Well, on this episode of Harford County Living with Rich Bennett, hopefully I'll be able to answer some of those questions while I have a local author, Stephen Landry, talking about old farts in space and traveling back to the Republic of Indian Stream. And I know what you're thinking. What are you talking about again, Rich? Well, believe it or not, Republic of Indian Stream was a place, and, well, the way space travel's going on, you never know. We may see old farts in space. Stay tuned. Now, before I get started, I want to talk to you about a very important organization, the Harford County Chamber of Commerce. Throughout my lifetime, I've been involved with several different chambers, and this one by far has got to be, actually it is the best chamber I've ever belonged to. I've gotten so much out of this. A lot of people join chambers just for networking. No, it's not all about that. These people that are part of the chamber, Angela, Heather, Kate, they care about you. They care about your business. They are the voice to support growth and local business in the community. They care about us. I would have never known about this digital advertising tax here in Maryland that they went to some people, down in Annapolis want to pass, which could affect all types of businesses. I would have never known about it if it wasn't for the chamber. I would have never met so many great people and business owners and even business employees if it wasn't for the Harford County Chamber of Commerce. So I'm urging you, God, it's worth looking into. Go ahead and join them. Just go to harfordchamber.org. Again, that's harfordchamber.org and look into it. Trust me, it is well worth it.
Welcome to Harford County Living with Rich Bennett, coming to you from the Freedom Federal Credit Union studios. Each week, you'll hear interesting interviews, commentary, discussions, storytelling, and more. Here's your host, Marine Corps veteran, professional DJ, entrepreneur, podcaster, and my father, Rich Bennett.
I'd like to welcome everybody to Harford County Living with Rich Bennett. Today, I have a gentleman on that we've tried to hook up a couple times, and COVID hit and a couple other things hit, and now we're finally doing it. And he is part of the Harford Writers Group, who I've had on before. Local author Stephen Landry. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
He has written solo a book, The Legend of Indian Stream, and has helped write 2 other books. But right now I want to focus on The Legend of Indian Stream because my understanding is you got some of this from when you served, right?
That's correct, yes.
All right, tell us how this came about, first of all.
So the story of the Legend of Indian Stream begins a long time ago when I was in the military. We did a terrain walk out at the Sharpstown, otherwise known as Antietam Battlefield.
Oh, nice.
And there were like 25 military officers, and we had some people who had studied the battle very carefully, who were briefing at the various intersections of the battle. We had a couple of rangers with us who obviously were very familiar with the battlefield as well. And somebody in the group made the comment that, if we'd had machine guns, this thing would have been over in 3 minutes, right? And the ranger came back with an interesting comment. He said that a pair of cheap Radio Shack walkie-talkies would have made all the difference. You wouldn't need any modern weapons if you'd have just had to
been able to communicate.
They would have been able to coordinate the 3 Union attacks instead of going in piecemeal. They would have all gone in at the same time, and the battle would have probably been over very quickly.
Yeah,
and the Army of Northern Virginia would have been destroyed, and that would have pretty much been the end of the war right there. So that got me thinking at that time, how could you do something like that? Then many years later, an author named Harry Turtledove, who's mostly considered the father of alternative history, wrote a book called The Guns of the South. And in that book, a group of Afrikaners from sometime in our future builds a time machine and goes back to the Civil War with the aim of preserving slavery in the United States, and they arm the South with AK-47s.
Wow.
And that happens just after Fredericksburg. Of course, the armed with AK-47s, the battle is over fairly quickly. I was thinking of it.
Interesting.
And that's a very good book. I highly recommend it. It's interesting how it plays out. The Civil War part of it is over very, very quickly, and the rest of the book has to deal with the how Lee, who becomes president of the Confederacy, deals with slavery and the Afrikaners from that point forward. Like I said, it's a really good book. So that kind of put the idea of giving people machine guns off the table, because he'd already written an excellent book on that. And I was looking at things more from the point of, how could it have been over for the North winning much more quickly?
Right.
And thinking about, well, what are the things that would have to happen? And one of the things I always said, well, you need to be an independent actor, because the Union generals were all idiots for the most part until Sherman and Grant showed up.
Right.
Hancock obviously was a fantastic general, but most of everybody else was a fool.
Yeah.
So that
young and scared.
Yeah. So you sort of need to be an independent actor, and I thought, well, played with a lot of ideas of how that would happen. And then one day I'm playing around on Wikipedia, and I came across something called the Republic of Indian Stream, which is a real place. It existed where Coos County, New Hampshire is right now.
Interesting.
First I'll tell you the true story of the Republic of Indian Stream. What happened there was the Treaty of Paris in 1783 that ended the American Revolution had an ambiguity in it, and that ambiguity is where the border is between present-day New Hampshire and present-day Quebec. There was a couple miles dispute that was unsettled, but in 1783 nobody cared because there was nothing there. It was just pine lands.
Right.
Well, by the middle of the 1820s, there had been a couple of prosperous farms that had grown up in this territory. And so governments do what governments do. Both sides started sending in tax collectors.
Oh, God.
And the people that lived there weren't getting any benefit from these tax collections. There was nobody was building any schools for them or anything like that.
And they were paying taxes on both sides.
And they were paying taxes to both sides. So they finally had enough. And in 1829, they seceded from both countries formally, established their own little nation up there. They had
and this is all true.
This is all true. You can look it up in the Coos County history of New Hampshire. And there's a little plaque as you go into the town of the name of the town just flew out of my head. But as you drive into the town that exists there now, there's a little plaque that talks about the history of Indian Stream. But because we did a recon up there,
right?
But so they succeeded. They formed their own government, constitutional government. They formed their own school system. They formed their oung militia, sheriff's department. They did all the things that.
How big was it?
It was about 150 square miles or so at that time. And Coos County right now is about 300 square miles, and it was about half of that present-day county out there.
Wow.
So they formed their own country, and nobody really cared for a while. And then in about 1832, a resident of the town had gotten into a great deal of debt to a hardware store in Sherbrooke, what is now Quebec, was then called Lower Canada. The sheriff of Sherbrooke came down and arrested the guy and brought him back up to Sherbrooke. Well, the militia formed up. They went up. They shot up the sheriff's house.
Oh, jeez.
They didn't kill anybody, but they rescued their guy and they brought him back. then the sheriff, of course, wasn't going to let this stand. So he went to the British government and said, we need to go get this guy. And then the rumors reached they call themselves the Republic of Indian Stream. The rumors reached them that the British were getting ready to come down and take this guy, and they knew they couldn't stand against the British regulars. So what they did is they asked the state of New Hampshire militia for help. Well, the state of New Hampshire militia moved in and never left.
Okay. So that part became
so. It became part of New Hampshire.
Yeah.
It didn't formally happen until 1836.
Wow.
But effectively from 1832 on, it became part of New Hampshire.
I never knew about that.
Yeah, it was a very obscure piece of history, but I ran across it.
Something they don't teach you in school.
Absolutely, unless you live in Coos County, New Hampshire. So I saw this thing and I said, hey, now there's a possibility right there. This little independent republic up there in the far north, on the other side of the White Mountains. So it's not easy for anybody to get to, especially back in 1824. It's still hard to get to today, as a matter of fact. But so I thought this is a place that some time travelers could land and effectively take the place over. And so the basic story of the Republic of Indian Stream is that the time travelers, and I had to build a reason for them to want to come back.
Right.
That has to do with a plague that wipes out the world in the far future. But that plague initiated in the Civil War. Was it 2020? Yeah, it's possible. It could have been. But we had this plague was going to originate in a Civil War prisoner of war camp.
Okay.
So that is the reason that the time travelers want to come back and affect the Civil War. So the idea is that the time travelers come back to this Republic of Indian Stream. They bring a lot of modern technology with them, a lot of modern military technology with them. So when the time comes that the sheriff from Sherbrooke is going to come down with the British regulars, the British regulars do not stand much of a chance against modern warfare. So they go around for several years. They just essentially take over the Republic. They build it up into an industrial powerhouse, put in railroads, dams, all that kind of stuff.
The time travelers do.
Time travelers do.
Okay.
And that puts them in a position so that when the Civil War breaks out, they are able to intervene on the side of the North and with the aim of preventing the plague from ever occurring.
Interesting.
Now, there's a second story because everything has to, you never want things to go smoothly. And the second story is that there is another set of parallel time travelers. This is a gentleman who worked in the time travel program in the far future that also had a relationship with a German spy who was killed by the Stasi when she flipped, and he decides to himself go back and rescue her and bring her back to the one place he could go, which is the same time frame, and his time traveling actions place great constraints on the time traveling actions of the other time travelers, and it all comes together in a head.
So it's like a sci-fi history thing mixed.
Yeah, it's a science fiction based alternative history.
I've never heard of anything like that before.
No,
I probably have, but really never paid attention to it.
Harry Turtledove's Gun to the South is probably the seminal work in that vein. There's another one by a guy named S.M. Sterling. It's a series of books called Island in the Stream of Time, I think it is, where
almost sounds like a song.
A time bubble forms around Nantucket. Nantucket.
Yeah.
A time bubble forms around, and they are thrown back to, I think, like 400, maybe even 400 BC. Long time ago.
Wow.
But they've got this modern technology, but it happens in the winter on Nantucket, so there are very few people there. But the one thing they do have is that a Coast Guard cutter is in town or in port when it happens.
Interesting. Now, how long did it take you to write this?
Well, the idea probably germinated for about a year.
Okay.
After I discovered the the news about this republic, which I
was
never
going to
heard
say,
of.
did you go up there?
We did.
You did? Okay.
I drove up there. We actually made 2 trips. One up to New Hampshire to look at that area, and then we made a tour of the areas in the Civil War where they would become involved.
Oh, wow.
So that was
nice little history trip.
It was a lot of fun.
That is. Fun. So you had the year of, I guess, all the ideas.
A year of ideas, and then maybe a year and a half to actually get it down in paper. You're familiar with the Harford Writers Group,
yes?
And I hadn't yet found them.
Okay.
When I did that, so I didn't get that terrific support that they provide.
Right.
They provide now. In my second novel, I did go through with Katie Sank. We did go through a process of having essentially the book in 5,000-word chunks reviewed once a month as we went through. And since that took like almost 2 years to get through that, but I think it worked really well.
Yeah, I got to admit, because and for those of you listening, I had the honor to talk to the Harford Writers Group at one of their meetings and stick around for the critique part. I was blown away. I wish I knew how to write, because just sitting in on the critiques, I would have loved to take part in that.
Yeah.
I mean, that was pretty awesome. So, all right, so this one, you said a year and a half to write, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And then you and Katie wrote another one, which took 2 years?
Yeah, I think it was close to 2 years for us to go from start to finish on that one.
How does that work, co-authoring?
An interesting question. The Maids of Chateau Vernet, which is the name of the book, is about, it's a time travel type of things, where an Israeli sniper is basically sitting on top of a nuclear bomb. They're trying to destroy the Pakistani nuclear stockpile. And he's basically sitting on top of a nuclear weapon when it goes off. And he gets blown back to 1942. And he's in 1942, and he realizes there's no way he's going to get back. He does have a small arsenal of weapons with him, and he recalls from family history that his great-great-grandmother is in a concentration camp in southern France, and decides to go get her. And in the process of going to get her, he ends up freeing about 30 other women. And I had this whole idea in my head.
Yeah.
And I knew at that point that most of the characters in the book were going to be women. The vast majority of characters in the book were going to be women. And I didn't think I was personally equipped to at that point to write that story by myself. So I had joined the Harford Writers Group by that point, and I said, are there any science fiction writers out there who would be interested in this idea? And Katie stepped forward. And the way it worked in that book was basically I wrote most of the book in terms of the plot line, and then Katie came in and filled in the good parts.
So you had the idea originally?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was, when you say, when you hear that co-author, I'm thinking, okay, is it both of them bouncing ideas off of something, or because it's not like songwriting.
No.
I mean, it's completely different. Songwriting, number one, not as long. So you just bounce lyrics off of each other, or one's doing the music and one's doing the words. But so that's pretty interesting.
And that led actually to the third book,
which I love the title of,
which is called Old Farts in Space. It's a comic space anthology. What happened there is we were asked by the Harford Writers Group to make a presentation on co-authoring. And as part of that co-authoring thing, we wanted to give them some homework, which was to pair up and write something together. Something short.
Good homework.
Maybe 1,000 words total. Just write something, bouncing it back and forth between two people. There's an old story, you may have seen it before, and I think it's called The Planet Zardoz.
I've heard of that.
And it's so it's set in the future. Obviously, it's intergalactic warfare and stuff. And the theory, the story is that there was 2 students in an English class that were assigned to write something in pairs, where one person would write something, throw it over the transom to the next person, and they would write something and come back. And the way that story unfolds is that the woman in the group starts writing this romantic novel about how she's in love with this guy and whatever, and then it goes over to the guy, and the guy says he doesn't really care about her. She was just a one night stand, and goes into this, and he's in his starfighter, and he's blowing things up and everything, and it goes back to her, and of course. She goes back to the romance, and they get angrier and angrier at one another, and the whole thing deteriorates very rapidly. But so anyway, I had them do this homework assignment, which was similar to that thing, and I needed something to base it on.
Right.
And I had long ago written a 5-page introduction to a script for a TV show.
I was going to say a movie script. Okay.
And the idea was that at 70, all the people who turned 70 were loaded into rocket ships and fired off into space to go find a new planet for mankind to settle. And so so we had different vignettes and people submitted their homework assignment, and one of the guys in the book, guy named Larry Garnett, said, we could turn this into a book. And so we asked him, well, okay, who's interested? And there were originally, I think there were 7 people, and a couple of people later dropped out. But we started writing these stories. So it starts off with the one. It focuses on one ship, and the crew, which is 5 people who are complete morons, because who else would? They're younger people, and who else would volunteer for this mission, right? And then it's 70,000 people in stasis, but the crew can't stay up. It's a 400-year journey, and the crew can't stay up. So what they do is, once the ship is out of Earth orbit, the crew goes to sleep, and 13 passengers at a time are woken up to keep an eye on the ship for a month. And each story is about a different group of these 13 passengers. That's
actually a pretty good idea. I like that.
So, and I guess the basic joke is, how many 70-year-olds does it take to pilot a spaceship? And it's obviously a comedy.
Right.
Many, many, many things go wrong over the course. They run into aliens, all kinds of things. And there's ended up being 5 authors of that. Myself, Larry Garnett, Dan Casenti, Kate Lashley, and Tom Hawkins.
And you said it's an anthology.
It's an anthology, so it's all short stories about each one of the. Well, the first one is about the crew,
right?
And the last one was written by all 4 of us, and that kind of focuses on when they get where they're going. But
okay.
All of the others, with a couple of exceptions, were written by at least 2 people. So I would write, I don't know, 5 pages, and then I'd send it over to Kate, and Kate would write 5 pages and send it back to me, and we go back and forth like that. And we didn't get into the thing in the story about the planet Zardoz. Everybody got around. Everybody wanted to make it work, and then we had to harmonize the whole thing so that all the stories kind of flowed together.
That's actually a pretty interesting technique. You think about it, because you write something, you're sending it to her. So I guess she's reading what you wrote and then just continuing it.
Yes.
And back and forth. That
and it took some twists and turns along. I would send something off to Dan, or send something off to Larry or Kate, and it would come back to me, and I was like, well, that's not where I wanted this to go, but okay. And
but
we
something
move
like
on.
that, then you got to figure out, okay, how can I write it to go back that way?
Exactly.
You guys could get a huge novel going on there.
Well, yeah, it's. Well, there would be, 400 times 13 or 12, 400 times 12 potential stories there.
Yeah.
We spread out. One of the other comic things is that through a massive lack of foresight, they selected the 70-year-olds by ship in an alphabetical order.
Oh, God.
So, for example, this is actually a story that got discarded because it didn't really go anywhere. But we had one story where all 13 people that were awoken were named John Smith.
Oh, jeez. You had to have George Foreman's in there as well, too, right?
Absolutely.
Him and all his sons.
So we had, we kind of spread out the stories that we've got across the alphabet, and some of the stories loop back on others. Like
right.
there's some alien artifacts that got left on the ship, and in the later stories, people are finding the artifacts and things. But
now, can all these books be found online?
They're all on Amazon.
Really?
If you search on Steve Landry, you'll find all three. Or you search on the Legend of Indian Stream, or the Maids of Chateau Vernay, or Old Farts in Space, and you'll find them.
Old Farts in Space. For some, every time you say that, I'm thinking of the Muppet thing, Pigs in Space.
Pigs in Space, yeah.
That's where you got the idea from.
For the title, yes.
So one of the things I didn't ask you, because you were former military.
Yes.
But you weren't writing in the military, correct?
No.
You didn't write before the military.
No.
So what made you decide to get into writing?
Okay.
And this is, I'll be honest with you, this is one of the things that blows me away when I talk to Karen and even Debbie. It's like, wow, you guys never thought about doing this, and then all of a sudden here you are writing books.
Yeah, I certainly came to writing in a non-traditional way.
Okay.
I'm an engineer, chemical engineer by trade. I went to a school called Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Massachusetts for the first couple degrees, and Stanford for the last one. But at WPI, we had something called a sufficiency, which is sort of like a minor. It had to be in humanities. It's not you don't take as many classes as a minor. It's only like 5 courses, I think. But I took mine in American literature. So I knew something. Part of the WPI education was writing. You did a lot of writing. They wanted you to write well.
Right.
And then obviously the PhD program, they also wanted you to write very well. So I knew how to actually write. But I never had a
write stories
or
or
anything like that. I'm not somebody that sat around and wrote stories as a kid or anything like that. The way I got into it was sort of strange. I was working for the brand new Department of Homeland Security back in 2003.
Oh, nice.
And I was as a contractor, and I was running the executive secretariat for something called the radioactive. I'm so used to using the acronyms. The radioactive dispersal device. Sorry, I've got the whole name. IND. I keep on thinking IND. It's improvised nuclear device. Sorry.
Okay.
So radiological dispersal device, improvised nucler device, working group.
Easy for you to say.
Yes. Sorry, I just call it the RDD IND working group my whole life. Which was the dirty bombs, which is a radiological slang for a radiological dispersal device, were pretty new. And the United States also hadn't really thought much about improvised nuclear devices, as opposed to state-built nuclear devices. And so the government put together, Department of Homeland Security in the lead, an interagency working group to look at all the ramifications of how we would detect, how we would respond, all that kind of stuff. And so I was kind of coordinating that whole thing.
Right.
Deep background in chemical weapons at that point. I'm not quite sure how I got on the radiological side, but I spent my whole military career destroying chemical weapons for the most part. So, and still doing that today, actually, for contractor. But back to the story. The RDD IND working group was functioning at that point, and on a Thursday afternoon, about 4 o'clock, I got a phone call from my boss, who would happen to be in a meeting with the secretary at that time, which is Tom Ridge, the first secretary. And he called me up and he said, Secretary Ridge needs a scenario for a dirty bomb attack written out, and he needs it in 2 hours.
What?
And I completely misinterpreted the requirement. What Secretary Ridge actually wanted was a outline that was like kind of like not a Venn diagram. Like, remember we used to diagram sentences or a PERT chart of how a PERT chart is a better description. He wanted of how you would conduct a dirty bomb attack. So 1, decide to attack. 2, procure materials.
Right.
He wanted a step-by-step thing. But I thought he wanted a story.
Oh God!
So I wrote a story about this group that procured some radioactive dispersal devices, did their target surveillance, and finally decided on their targets, assembled their gathered their materials, assembled their weapons, and conducted the attack. And I sent it to him. I was about 5 minutes late. I got it about 6:05, 6:10.
You sent it directly to Secretary?
Well, I sent it to my boss who was in the meeting with the secretary. And he immediately sent it back to me and said, no, this is what we wanted. This is what we want. So that took me, having already written the story, that only took me like 15, 20 minutes to put together. But while they were waiting for me to complete that task, the secretary read what I had actually written, the scenario, which is a story,
right?
5-page story or 6-page story, how this thing would work. And after he read it, he said, well, this is better than we just paid a certain company $2.5 million to write for this exercise, a big major exercise we have coming up. And so that led to me becoming the primary author for something called the Senior Officials Exercises, which is they were conducted at cabinet level, usually in the Eisenhower Executive Office building across the street from the White House.
Nice.
We had these, and we did these once a quarter. We'd bring in all through. So I started writing them in 2004. I started writing the scenarios and wrote them through about the end of 2014. And we have them once a quarter. We'd usually conduct one at the assistant secretary level and then one at the cabinet, or deputy secretary level and then one at the cabinet level. President would come occasionally.
Wow.
I would write these stories, and they'd be usually broken up into different moves.
Right.
Like we've heard there's something going on. So what kind of preparations are we going to make? And then the next step is, well, some initial thing has happened, and then some big thing has happened, and the players would go through it, and then there'd be a critique afterward, and figure out, and we weren't playing gotcha.
Right.
I mean, we would spend months looking for real policy issues that weren't solutions to, and then the exercise would serve to put those in tight focus. And usually after the event, there would be some kind of directive that would go out to all the departments that we need to fix this, we need to fix this, we need to fix this, we need to develop this capability, whatever it was.
Wow.
But as I wrote these stories over a course of time, people kept on saying, "Boy, man, you should write a novel." Well, when I left that job in 2015, I said, "It's time to write a novel." And that's what I did. Like I said, The Legend of Indian Stream was that first one.
So basically, with what you were writing with Homeland Security, you helped define Homeland Security.
To a certain extent. Yeah.
Have they ever called you back saying, "Hey, Steve, come on, we need some more stuff written"?
Not since 2015. I had a falling out with the person who was in charge of that program.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
It was actually over an English issue.
That's got to be an amazing feeling, though, to do that, and then, wow.
Yeah, it was a very rewarding and interesting job.
Yeah. Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Man. So, all right. So you got into that because work told you should get into writing a book, which you did. That you got The Legend of Indian Stream, and that came out in what year? 2017. So 3 years ago. Okay. Yeah. And people can find that on Amazon, or you have a website as well, right?
No, I don't.
No, you don't. Okay. No. Like I said, people can find that on Amazon. You can find it on HarfordCountyLiving.com because I have it linked there. And actually, I'll have to get the other two books linked there, because what I've been doing was just the only books I had on there were the ones that I featured as Book of the Month, which that one was. but now I decided I'm adding more to it.
Okay.
Anybody that's been on the podcast, I'm adding their books to it as well. Because there's a lot of great books out there. And now I got to read Old Farts in Space.
There you go.
I mean, that one and the other one, but I can't pronounce it.
The Maids of Chateau Vernet.
Yeah, I remember the maids part, but
Yeah, it was originally titled 30 Maids.
no, that's easier. To say.
And there were suggestions to change that, and so we ended up with the Maids of Chateau Vernet.
Okay. Now, you working on another book yet?
I am. It's tentatively titled The Elohim. It's about a rogue AI that believes itself to be the angel of God.
Ooh.
Not a good thing for the human race.
That sounds very interesting already, though. So, have you always been into sci-fi?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, and that's because as a kid, I loved it. And I still like watching sci-fi. I used to read sci-fi books all the time.
Okay.
I don't know why I stopped. I need to get back into it, especially because I don't think I've ever read anything about time travel.
Okay, well, there's a lot out there.
Yeah, because you think about that a lot, especially serving in the military. It's like, God, going back in time to the Civil War, even the old West, having the weapons down. I think they've even made some movies about it. It's like, wow,
There's I think it's called The Final Conflict. A movie with where the Nimitz, I think it's the Nimitz.
Yes.
Gets finds itself in a time bubble and gets thrown back to day before Pearl Harbor, if I recall correctly.
Wow. That's because that could be. And the thing is, if you're covered with the Humvee on there, now you're going that Humvee. I take it is back there when they all have horses. So yeah, definitely got more horsepower than you. Forget that, and a 50 cow on top. So, Steve, you have anything to add?
No, I think I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And anytime you want to come back on, I'm definitely going to get you on the other podcast because I know, oh my God, with Homeland Security, I could talk to you for a long time about that. Once again, if you want to pick up the books, we're going to have them in the show notes. And I suggest definitely to get it. Even if you've never read sci-fi, give it a shot. Try it because it's sci-fi and history mixed. And if you're like me, more than likely you never heard of Indian Stream. And now, I'm surprised they haven't made a movie or anything about that.
Here's the book to make the movie.
There you go.
Right here.
There you go. I'll have to contact somebody
and
for
certainly
that.
Old Farts in Space would make a terrific vehicle for older actors.
That would be hilarious. Steve, thanks a lot.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Few things that I would like to remind you all about. Number one, please, 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 please leave a review of the podcast. All you have to do is go to lovethepodcast.com/Harco Living. Again, that's lovethepodcast.com/Harco Living. And while you're at it, if you can, please buy me a coffee. That's right. Buy me a coffee. Well, you're not really buying me a coffee. You're making a donation so I can keep this podcast going. Yeah, it's because of you and my sponsors that I'm allowed. Well, I'm not allowed. I'm able to keep this podcast going. There's a lot that goes into it, a lot more that you can even imagine. So just go to buymeacoffee.com/Harco Living. Again, that's buymeacoffee.com/Harco Living. And it's that time again. That's right. I am giving away a $25 gift card to Route 24 Ale House. The winner's going to be chosen on Wednesday, March 17th, my father's favorite holiday, St. Patrick's Day. And all you have to do is leave a review of the podcast. And you know where to go to do that. lovethepodcast.com/Harco Living. So leave a review. I'm going to pick one person at random. That person will get a $25 gift card to Route 24 Ale House where you can go and enjoy a kickin' bourbon burger, which is out of this world. Wings have to be the best wings around, and all types of different beer on tap. So again, just leave a review and good luck. March 17th, we're going to have the winner.